Hello, and welcome to the presentation of the results of a research done on optimizing supply chain resilience and efficiency in the post-pandemic era. My name is Kanisio Tanyanywa, and I'm a lead researcher discussing about the Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe. What is supply chain management? It's a network of organizations, of resources involved in creating and delivering goods and services to end customers. We have been told it's a set of processes that are used to acquire goods and services, a process consisting of all the parties involved in fulfilling a customer's request. Who are these components? Who are these parties? The manufacturer, the producer, the warehouses, the retailers, and the customers. As you all know, COVID-19 was one of the greatest disruptions to supply chain management. That whole process of goods and services from the producers to the people was disrupted by COVID-19. What happened? Supply chain management involves five key items: planning, sourcing, manufacturing, delivering, and returning the goods. But COVID-19 disrupted that whole chain as one of the biggest disruptions because it had lockdowns. People died. The weaker supply chains even were broken. The Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe is a statutory regulator of all medicines for the people and for animals in the Republic of Zimbabwe. It was hit hard by COVID-19. All the supply chains were disrupted. It prescribes the medicines. It had to go to use the emergency medicines. Whatever was reserved for the people was used because the medical system, the health system was so shattered that it had to use some contingency methods for them to use to take care of the COVID-19. This research has analyzed those disruptions. It identified the weak points. It suggested solutions to make the supply chain more resilient. There are five factors I'm going to discuss. How we analyze disruptions by COVID-19. What is involved in supply chain management are five things: demand forecasting and planning. We need to plan how much do we need, where is it going to be taken, how much will be spent, and how much is going to be used. Where do we store those things? It's called inventory management. It's kept in the warehouses, a very key component of the supply chain management. The logistics. How do we distribute from the raw materials to the manufacturing company and to the goods and services can actually go to the final consumer and customer? Supplier relationships. The people who supply things, are they supplying raw materials? Are they supplying finished goods? Are they supplying services? All those things, including financial services, they are also called suppliers. There are also risks that are involved when we're dealing with the supply chain management, because at every point of the supply chain, we actually have serious risks that we have got to overcome. Then we have got the technology integration. I will discuss the results one by one. Demand forecasting and planning. COVID-19 made forecasting a nightmare for the Medicines Authority of Zimbabwe. Local and external suppliers were affected by lockdowns. People could no longer move. The restrictions, they were so stringent that the supply chain was disrupted. What are the solutions that we found? After we analyzed all those kind of problems that the MCAZ faced, diversification of suppliers is a solution to cater for the restrictions for the pandemic that we had. Investment in the digital technology. Our society, in the Zimbabwean society, it was used to face interaction of people. The goods and services were actually delivered to the people. But in this case, the disruption caused that we needed to invest in digital. Local sourcing and production. Some of our suppliers are not based in Zimbabwe. They are from the countries neighboring to Zimbabwe, in the region, including those who are abroad, China and India, and sometimes from Europe. We needed agile supply chain practices to be able to mitigate these kind of disruptions. Collaboration and partnerships. How did this affect the inventory management? There were shortages, both of raw materials and of finished goods. Sometimes with excess. I said earlier on, sometimes the medicines that they were using were taking antibiotics which were meant to be used for something else. because we were trying to find contingent methods to treat COVID-19. We had to have sometimes excess of stock of medicines which we could not use, and we also had storage issues, excess and shortages. We had disrupted demand forecasting. Could no longer plan, MCAZ could no longer plan properly how much medicines were required, how much was coming from abroad, with borders closed, with ports closed, with aeroplanes not flying, people restricted and people dying. They were disrupted demand forecasting. The supply chain itself was disrupted. So one of the methods we found as a research team was just-in-time inventory. That was one way that was used to cater for the shortages. Safety stock. It's important to keep some safety stock. Data analytics. We needed to analyze the incoming data, the suppliers, the customers, the manufacturers. How do we balance all this? Data analytics and supplier diversification. While we were relying probably from India or from China, those countries were heavily affected by COVID, and therefore we needed to do something called supplier diversification. Supplier relationships and risk management is one component of the supply chain. What are we talking about? There were supply shortages. We developed relationships with each supplier, each particular product. Local suppliers like Varichem, like drug clubs, like KIBS, those are the companies that produce the drugs that are fed into the MCAZ supply chain, and then they are certified and distributed to the people who had supply shortages. Reliance on some suppliers could cost everything else, and no wonder why there were cost escalations because of these disruptions. The health system itself was impacted. There were so many regions of Zimbabwe where the medicine were not even reaching there because there were issues to do with suppliers and logistics. And we also had our own high risks involved, the geopolitical risk. COVID-19 was not only a health pandemic. COVID-19 had political connotations. So the way each country was reacting to the pandemic, it also had in itself embedded geopolitical risk in itself. Operational risks, people were shattered, people were dying, shops were closed, borders were closed, airports were closed, people were in lockdown. Operational risks, including logistical risks, transportation. There was no movement of people. It was very restricted. The trucks could no longer move. The aeroplanes were not moving. The ships, the ports were closed. All these risks were also involved. We also had some compliance risks. How do we deal with medications and vaccines that were being proposed by the world, especially the first world, to Africa? How do we deal with them with compliance issues? And MCAZ faced these compliance risks in the supply chain because they needed to find a way of giving the correct medication to the people of Zimbabwe. What were the solutions that we proposed as a research team? Develop a weighted scoring system to quantify the risk monitoring, categorization of those risks, to make sure we understood, is this logistical? Is this compliance? Is this geopolitical? Is this operational? Quantifying and grouping them into groups, then we'll be able to deal with them that way. Risk monitoring, diversification strategy to diversify our suppliers so that we can understand where we're coming from and where we are going. Multi-sourcing, local production, joint buying, supplier development programs, all these were important methods that we could deal with. In terms of the logistics aspect and distribution, there was a need from the research that to integrate infrastructure upgrades. The networks are supposed to be integrated. Rail, road, air, sea, they're supposed to be integrated. We're also talking about the smart technologies. We needed to move out from just the basic way in which we're dealing face-to-face, because we're now facing a serious pandemic. We needed to do this. Regional partnerships with other countries, smart technologies, they cut across the borders. Diversified transport network, digitizing the regulatory framework to avoid meetings where people were going to meet and discuss how to approve. We need to digitize, and also embracing AI-driven demand forecasting. This also comes into what we call technology integration, the fifth element. What do we do? It's not just a want to have technology, it's an absolute necessity. Internet of Things, blockchain, artificial intelligence. These are methods that we need to do. So we came up with a roadmap, a technology roadmap to come up, which has got about 4 stages. The first stage, to lay the foundation, the groundwork, do pilot projects, scaling up, monitor and continuous improvement. We needed to forge strategic partnership, strengthen supply chain resilience, improving regulatory efficiency, promote data-driven decision-making, aligning with global and regional health agendas. At the end of the day, we have come to a conclusion. The Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe and the Zimbabwe health system sector, they just survived the COVID-19 scare. Yes, with casualties, but they just survived. Now we are more resilient because we have adopted, we have proposed the resolutions to adopt, to digitize, to integrate, to develop partnerships that can make us more resilient for the future crises. COVID-19 was the biggest and greatest disruption to the global supply chains. But we're grateful that with proper research, we have come up with proposals that we can come up with. We have also given case studies of other companies that survived. Thank you very much. Kwalumba, merci beaucoup, tatenda.